All right, in our last video, we went over how to complete the square. Now this is going to be our first application of completing the square. And the goal is to take our generic equation, okay, our generic conic equation. And this is going to be generic, right? That's what it looks like in generic form, which when looking at this equation, I have no idea what the radius is. I have no idea what the center is. Not until it's in a more familiar form. Which is the one in red. Okay, that's our standard form. So we are going to go from one to the other. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to do some organization first. I'm going to get my x's together, and I'm going to get my y's together. And I'm also going to take that constant value, and I'm going to move it over to the other side. So when I do this, I'm going to get x squared plus 32x plus, I'm going to leave it as a blank. As you notice, what we have here in the standard form is these are perfect square binomials, which is what we're writing in the other video. So I'm leaving a blank there to complete my square to end up with this perfect square binomial. And then I'm going to include my y values, which is y squared minus 18y plus another blank. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to complete the square twice now in the generic form to create the standard form. And then I said I was going to subtract 336 over to the other side of the equation. So now I'll have minus 336. All right, so working with the x's. If I look at 32 and I take half of 32, that gives me 16. That's the number that has to be in my perfect square binomial. But now if I square 16, that has to give me the blank. So we'll go on my calculator real quick. 16 squared is going to be 256. But because we're working with equations, the left side always has to equal the right side, right? Equal equations. So if I'm adding 256 to the left side of my equation, you better believe I have to add 256 to the right side of my equation to keep it balanced. And we're going to do the same thing with the y terms, where I'll put a plus to separate these, right? That should carry down. So now if I take the negative 18 and I take half of that, that'll give me negative 9. So now my next perfect square binomial will be y subtract 9 squared. So in this generic form, what am I going to have to add on to that? Well, that's going to be negative 9 squared, which is 81. Just like I did with the 256, I have to add it to both sides. So plus 81. And now this equation will be equal to, and if I add all of these up, I should end up with just 1. And you can see that matches with the equation above. And that's how we use completing the square to go from the generic form of the circle to the standard form of the circle. And we can see that the center here is going to be negative 16 comma 9, and the radius is going to equal the square root of 1, which is 1. Okay. Next video, we're going to look at how to do the same thing with the ellipse, and there's a small variation from what we're doing here, but it's not really any different.